This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast about all things innovation in the people space. I'm Kyle Rode. Let's start the show. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. This is going to be a fun one today. With us today, we have Hannah Daniker. She is the sales and marketing manager of the Better Together group and author of the book, Well, Shit. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kyle. I'm excited to be on a podcast where I can talk about my book with the full title name.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. I do have to flag it as explicit technically, I think, in Apple Podcasts, but you know what? We're okay. We live in the real world. People use that word from time to time, so it's all right.
Fantastic.
So the first question I want to start off with, I ask almost every author that I have on the show, is what motivated you to write this book?
Well, I started this book in the middle of 2020. So it was the midst of a pandemic, and I was doing a lot of social quarantines. I was dating someone in the US and traveling across the border pretty frequently. So I think I did like 5 or 6 14-day quarantines by myself in the span of a year, which is a lot of isolation. And through that, I started writing a little bit just about some different memories and stories that I had had. And really the origin of this came out from some life experience that I was struggling through in the moment and wanting to talk to my mom about it, but not necessarily wanting to listen to my mom's advice from where she sat as a mature adult. I was like, I'm so happy for you. Love that you have this life experience, but I need somebody to be talking to this, to be talking about this, who's like me, who's similar to me, who's also in their 20s at the same time. So I was kind of experiencing that feeling, and then also starting to think about my one-day kids and the concept that they might be experiencing some insane things when they're in their 20s, and that they might want to be talking to somebody like their mom, but not their mom as a mature adult. And so I started writing down all of these stories and life lessons that I could one day give to my kids in a diary entry. And then it just escalated really quickly from a diary entry into gifts that I was giving people. I had some beautiful stories from different people about lessons that they had taught me. And I was like, oh, it would be rude not to share this with them. Like they should know the impact that they had on my life. And then from there, it turned into a book, and now it's just out for everybody to see.
Yeah. So, so the full title of the book is Well, Shit, Time to Grow Up. And so, I think it's really interesting to have, this from the context of somebody that's going through it, somebody that's having that lived experience that so many people in their 20s are going through. And I love the title. I mean, I love any title with profanity. I mean, we discussed this before I hit record. Yeah. I'm just like, yeah, perfect. The more profanity, the better in book titles, in my opinion. But when I read through the book and I was preparing for the interview, it reminded me of the kind of the meme or the feeling that so many of us have had as we've matured throughout our careers or through our lives, is like, where's the adult in the room? And you look around and you're like, oh wait, it's supposed to be me. Like I think everybody's kind of had that experience at one point in their life or another. And then there's this realization that people are actually like expecting you to like be a leader or be an adult or like, and it's interesting. But there's a lot of expectations that come with that. And there's a lot of stress and pressure that comes with that maturing process. And so walk me through as you were writing this and as you were, connecting with people around this topic. How did you approach writing a book that helped articulate that experience that you and so many others are going through?
I think really it started with my own experiences. It was what I was doing in that moment. I was going through a process of growing up, of going from being a university student to a full-time employee, and then from a full-time employee to a management role. And so it was throughout a duration of time that there was a lot of progress happening in my life. And I was able to look at it and go, holy shit, I really need some help with this and this and this. And so that's kind of where the topic stemmed from. It was, can you can you believe we're here right now? Can you can you just take a step back and holy shit, we're here. Well, shit, it's time to do it. And so it came to this place where it was information that I needed. And then as I was coming to the end of processing all of this, it was information that a lot of my friends really needed. I was an accelerator in school. I graduated early, so I kind of stepped ahead of my peer group in a lot of ways and was the first of many to experience a lot of those transitions. And so I was kind of doing it alone. And that's where the concept of writing a lot of it down came from. I was alone. I was in quarantine. Not many people I knew were going through the same transitions. So it was therapy in a sense. And then as I was transitioning out of that and feeling more confident and comfortable in it, I was able to see my old peers around me experiencing that at the exact same time, going, well, shit, what do we do here? And really being able to just love on them and care for them in the way that I was loved on and cared for, understanding that it was having value in some similar ways kind of across the board.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, that sounds kind of isolating to go through that, and then to go through that through the pandemic, and to have that kind of that, all of that reflection time as you're sitting in a quarantine. So I think one of the things that's really interesting from my perspective and many other people practitioners is, we spend a lot of time talking about generational diversity,
Absolutely.
and the topic of, how do we help Gen Z, or what do we do for Gen Z, or more accurately, a lot of times what you hear is, how do we deal with Gen Z? And I have to believe that that's exactly the opposite feeling for people in your generation who are like, how the hell do we deal with Gen X and boomers and these millennials that, think they know everything? So what advice, I'm going to ask two questions. What advice do you have for the other generations who are trying to figure out how to, kind of interact and deal with this paradigm of this new generation entering the workforce? And then I'm curious, on the flip side, what advice do you give to people in Gen Z as they enter the workforce?
Mm-hmm. Great questions that require so much more than 30 minutes, unfortunately. So I will
Correct.
give you a link to my presentation, because I do give a presentation on how to hire and retain and recruit Gen Z. And I think the most important thing when you're working with Gen Z is starting with the concept that you don't know everything. Unfortunately, managers love to show up, and we love to think that we know what's going on. And we love to think that we can give very specific direction based on what we have understood in the past to work successfully. And while I think that basing what you're doing on experiences is valuable, it's also creating a barrier, because this next generation is not the same as everyone who has passed before them. And so not everything is going to work the same, and some things would work better than others. And so coming at it with not a here's my blanket problem solving solution, and let's actually just sit down together. Let's talk for a little while. Let's have a conversation about what's going to work well, and then come up with a plan together on the other side, is my biggest point of advice. But that's really hard to do if you don't have time, if you don't have mental space and capacity, if you don't have the team to support you in that area, and if you don't understand the value of doing it. So I would really recommend checking out that presentation, kind of understanding first who Gen Z is before we start to try and influence them is really beneficial. But then on the flip side, for Gen Zs, I don't know that they are coming into the workforce right now saying, how do I deal with boomers? How do I deal with Gen X? How do I deal with millennials? I think that they're graduating from their educations and they're coming into a working world going, how do I do this life right now? I think that perhaps in previous years, there's been more of a divide between individuals and generations. And I think that in the last 5 years, with the pandemic and then the pending recession of whatever we're going through right now, I'm not an expert in that. I don't want to put my finger on that specifically, but it's challenging regardless, whatever that is. I think that generations as a whole are trying to fight this battle. I think that millennials and Gen Zs are coming at it from a more unified perspective because they're experiencing some of the effects more similarly. And Gen X and boomers are experiencing the effects more similarly. So it's funny. Boomers are kind of winning. Their houses are becoming worth more. They are looking towards retirement. They don't necessarily have to retire. They enjoy working. They're kind of in a decent setup as they're transitioning here. And Gen Z is coming into a working world where they're struggling to make more than minimum wage. Minimum wage is changing all the time, and employers, boomers and Gen Xers and some millennials are struggling to understand the value of raising wages when minimum wage is raising so much. So there's just such a cluster mess of conversations between people. And I don't know that they're coming in saying, I don't know how to deal with these people. I think they're coming in saying, I don't know how to deal with this life. Like, how do I just grow up? And that's kind of more the struggle that they're facing.
Sure. Yeah, so it's a really interesting
It's a lot of
perspective.
work for
Well, yeah,
a question. Sorry.
no, you're good. I think what's interesting, going back to your first point about, kind of authority figures admitting that they don't have all of the answers. I think that's one of the more recent paradigm shifts that we've seen just in the workplace in general, where,
Mm-hmm.
it used to be that you're in the workplace and you could only access the answer to your question by going to your manager. Like that was it. Like it was tribal knowledge, or it wasn't documented, and Google didn't exist. We didn't have access to all the information we did. So what you had to do is you had to go rely on an authority figure to give you an answer to your question.
Mm-hmm.
But in the world that we live in now, and most of Gen Z has never had to rely on authority to get an answer to their question. They've been able to rely on
Correct.
all of these information sources outside of an authority
Mm-hmm.
figure. The example I use is like my kid. I have a 12-year-old, and he'll ask me a question, like a trivia question, and I've learned I can't like BS my way through the question. I just have to be like, I don't know, Google it. Because if I don't know the answer, he's gonna fact check me because he's gonna go Google it and give me the exact answer. Like, oh no, that song was
Mm-hmm.
written in 1972 by so and so, versus no, it was 74. And I, anyways.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really big paradigm shift. And then I think the second part of the question is really interesting. So, how do I do this life? And I think, you know, as a millennial, as an elder millennial myself, I think there's certainly a little bit of a questioning around, like, is this all there is? Right? Like, is this really what it's all about? And
Mm.
I think again, previously there was a paradigm of, kind of the white picket fence, the house, the family, the 2.5 kids, the career, and you're able to kind of, afford a lifestyle. That's not necessarily the case anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world has changed quite a bit, and I think there's again, with the access to information and kind of the visibility to this, there's a little bit of a questioning around how people do
Absolutely.
things, and if you look at some of the workplace trends around the gig economy, how long people stay in jobs, the percentages of salary increases when people jump jobs, and the
Mm.
fact that that's not as much of a social stigma anymore to be a job hopper. In fact, it's kind of accepted, um, because that's how you get more money, right? All of these things are impacting you know the workforce. So I'm curious, as you think about it in your personal experience, and as you think about your peer group, what guidance are you giving them as they try to answer these questions, these big questions about how do I want to do this life? Like what matters to me, and how am I going to approach this? How are you guiding people to answer these questions for themselves?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do for your employees is not answer their questions for them, right? Like these young adults are going to be coming to you, and they're going to have lots of questions about lots of different things, whether they're doing the right job, whether they're reaching their goals. And there are some things, yes, that you need to answer for them without a doubt. As a good support system to somebody, you will give them answers. But it's also important to give them the tools to empower themselves to answer those questions. And so, one of the things that I'm really encouraging people right now, specifically in Gen Z, um, is that life is not written in ink. Like, not many things that you're doing in your life are written in ink. And as you're coming out of an education, it feels really, really substantial. Everything you're doing feels like the biggest deal in the world because everything that you've done in your life has led you to this point where you have a certificate and you can now begin life, for a better lack of terms. It's kind of what it's pictured as from a student's perspective. And so it feels so scary. But if you look at any adult who's over the age of 50, most people transition through their careers pretty aggressively. Most people nowadays have another marriage. Most people nowadays own 5 or 6 or 7 houses in their span of a lifetime. And so, one of the things that I just try to empower people to remember is that the decisions you're making right now, yes, they have effect on what comes next. Yes, what you're doing today does change what happens tomorrow, but it doesn't mean that it will affect the rest of your life forever. And so it doesn't need to be that scary. Just start taking a step forward. Just choose something and start moving. And if in 10 months from now you've learned a lot and you have more information and you can make a better decision later down the line, do that. But don't feel like it's an ink because it's just not helping your perspective. That's kind of the best thing that I try to remind people who are transitioning and graduating out of school.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think that advice goes well beyond Gen Z. Like you could say that to almost
Yeah.
anybody who's got this fear of movement, or fear of failure. The reality is, typically in life, a failure that you perceive to be a failure isn't really even a failure. It's just something you learned from, and
Mm-hmm.
you move forward, or it's something that needed to happen for you to kind of level up a
Yeah.
little bit. I think if you talk to many people, they've probably had those experiences, and what seemed like a failure was actually a blessing
Yeah.
in disguise. So really, really sage advice.
Mm.
I also think it's interesting to think about it from the context of, um, the decision that you make isn't as big as it feels right now, right? Like,
Mm,
like that's I
absolutely.
think it's really it's a good point. Like the context of like, you work your entire life to get somewhere, and you think that's where you're supposed to be, and then so many times you get there and you're like, is this all there is?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like, oh my gosh, I
Right?
can't believe I did this. This is what I chose to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
some
yeah.
people get down a line of education and they get right into a career and it's really challenging. I have a really good friend right now who, yeah, spent 5 years in school, is now a nurse. A year later, she absolutely hates it. She's like, I've been working my entire life to get here. I don't even know what I'm doing. Um, but it's shock. Just erase it. Just try something different. Like it's good and valuable to remember that your skills are still transferable into other places. But yeah.
Absolutely. So that leads me to, kind of I guess my next general question. So, we talked about this a little bit before I hit record. And so you probably know where I'm going with this. Like, I feel like that experience is pretty universal, regardless of the generation that you're in. I think
Hmm.
like as I went through that when I was in my 20s. My guess is somebody in Gen X had the similar experience, baby boomers and so on and so forth. And, I feel like there is some universality in that in that type of experience. And so as you were writing this and as you were reflecting on this and through the course uh, of this work, what are those areas where you see commonalities as opposed to differences between these generations in the workplace?
Hmm. I think that there are a lot of commonalities between Gen Z and Gen X specifically. Gen Z and Gen X share a lot of commonalities just in their character traits based on the way that they were raised. And then millennials and boomers share a lot of qualities as well, just because boomers raised millennials and Gen X raised Gen Z. And it kind of transitions down like that in a funny trickle line. People Most people, regardless of the generation that they sit in, want the same thing. And they want to be respected. They want to be earning a fair wage for what they're doing. And most individuals want to feel like they have somewhere to progress to. And so it's not like it's a new formula. It's not surprising or shocking to anybody how to best collaborate with Generation Zs. Really, the problem that I see that lies is the hump between it, is just the connection barrier.
Mm.
It's exactly what you're mentioning. Most people in their 20s are going through this transition period. And it's funny, as we were talking earlier, I thought about this girl. I think her name is Taylor Thompson. Ibanez. She's a comedian. She does this bit about people in their 20s. It's basically like having a big pool, and you go fishing and you're trying to fish different things out. You got to get out the daddy issues that you were dealing with as a kid. You got to get out the bad behaviors of smoking your cigarettes or whatever. You got to work on learning to show up, to work on time. Like, there are some things that people work through in their 20s. It just really is a nature of transitioning into a spot where you have autonomy over yourself, and then transitioning into a spot where you hold yourself accountable for those things. And that's hard in your 20s, for sure, because you have to learn how to do that. But I think that you're very right. It's a similar thing that all generations are experiencing at the same point in time.
Yeah, I agree. The benefit that I had when I was in my early 20s is that social media didn't exist as it does today. MySpace was there, Facebook was just getting started, but I didn't
MySpace, a
post.
BBM boy.
What is this term? I don't know what this term is.
BBM, BlackBerry Messenger.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. I don't know. I'll take it. Like if
Maybe
we're
not.
gonna start using phrases like cap and riz, I don't know that I can keep up. But I know what mid means, and then oh my gosh, my kids started saying yacht, and then I googled it, and I'm like, you can't say that anymore. But anyways.
Just tell him that it's not very Sigma for him to be speaking that way, and he'll
Sigma.
be like, "Oh, Dad, what is that? You can't know what that means."
Well, that's fine. I told him that, my counter argument was, well, your dad has Riz, so deal with it. So
There you go. I like that. That's good. That's funny. Yeah, that's Gen Alpha. That's a whole nother generation.
There you go.
They are completely separate and whole. Oh, goodness.
I don't know how we got there, but here we are, Hannah. So thank you.
I don't know either.
Thank you for taking me down this road. Welcome to Rebel HR. This is what we do here. But going back to kind of where I was going with that, like, I think the reality is, and I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where, like, I used to be the generation that was shit all over. Like
Mm-hmm.
That was me. And I was actively working to not be clumped in to that group.
Mm-hmm.
That was how I dealt with it. I didn't have this book to help me figure out how to do this. Right. So I just kind of like assimilated to what
Mm-hmm.
I thought the generation in power wanted me to be. And honestly, that kind of fucked things up, because it was like, you're actively fighting against your authentic self. And, you talk about like unpacking all your, like, all your stuff.
Baggage.
Yeah. All your baggage like that, you're creating it in that case. Right. And
Yeah.
so I would encourage all the professionals that listen to this podcast and kind of and are enjoying this conversation, remember what that was like for you, right? If you're that next generation up, have empathy for what Gen Z is going through right now, because they're going through the same shit you had to go through. Don't make them go through it in a painful way, right?
Mm,
Bridge that connection barrier as you described it, and reach out and have empathy.
mm-hmm.
And I think going back to your first point, know that you might not have the answer, and open
Yeah.
up the lines of communication and connection. That's where I think that's the sweet spot, right? Like as where I sit in my seat, and all the professionals listening to this that are in leadership or HR positions or whatever your role is, like intentionally make sure that you are creating an environment for everybody to thrive and for that connection to exist. Don't let
Mm-hmm.
the division win, even if you
Yeah.
were treated like shit, because a lot of us
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
right?
I gave this presentation because I talk about how to retain them and recruit Generation Z, and I gave it in Niagara just a couple weeks ago. And I started it a little bit differently this time. I really liked the way I started it. I said, "Hey, everybody, thanks for coming today. Like, so excited to have you here. What I want you to do is take out your cell phones. I want you to hold them up in the air. I want you to turn them on silent and then put them away." It's a crazy concept, I know. And then I was like, I'll explain more about this later on. We continued forward. I went through some stats. We kind of shared some interesting stuff. And then I said, now you can take your cell phones back out if you need to, because I understand that that's an anxiety that builds in some people, and you're all in transportation. I don't want to freak you out. Logistics, you need your cells. That's fine. But what I do want you to understand is the way that it made you feel when me, someone with no authority and no reason to tell you anything, told you to do something.
Mm.
Because not often are people telling 50, 60, 70-year-old humans to do anything anymore. And so someone with no authority coming forward and telling you to do something based on a lack of information never feels great. But that's kind of what happens every single day with Gen Z. People come at them and they say, "I want you to do this. I need you to do that. This is your project. This is your thing." And they don't really give them the why or the understanding. They don't sit down with them and go, "Hey, here's something that we need to do as a team. How do you think you can help with this? Where can you collaborate with this? Where are you best going to support here?" There's so many conversations to be had. And I don't want to minimize that people show up to work to do work. Yes, of course, like, work still needs to be done. But there are just ways that we can communicate about that work that can end in a more effective collaboration, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that's just such a great piece of general advice. As well. Like it's like barking orders at people. The whole, like, this paradigm of command and control, it's been debunked. Like it is, like if you're still operating under like the paradigm of like theory X leadership and command and control is how you get stuff done, and you micromanage every task to your exact perspective of what it needs to look like, yeah, it doesn't work. Like, good luck if that's how you're trying to lead or, operate. Like you have to help people understand the why. You have to bring them along for the ride. It's a respect thing, right? Like it's like a humanistic respect thing. Side note, when you have an entire generation of people that haven't had to listen to authority to understand the best way to do something, they're just not going to listen to you. And quite frankly, the more conflict able, I don't know if that's a word, but they're just going to straight up argue with you, right? Like it's going to be super frustrating for everybody involved, right?
Yeah.
And so, don't open yourself up to that. I think one of the best things I ever did. So I have an amazing employee. She's Gen Z. She's been working for me for a couple of years, started as an intern. I don't assume what I think she'll enjoy doing. I ask her what she would like to do. Now, that doesn't mean I only give her stuff she likes to do. Yeah, sometimes there's junk. We all have junk in our jobs.
Stuff needs to get done, for sure.
For a reason. But if I can buffer that with, hey, here's some great stuff that's really exciting and energizing and engaging for you, now that's a whole hell of a lot better work experience than, hey, here's all the shit work that nobody wants to do. Shit rolls downhill. Literally, somebody told me that at one point in my career. You have to do this because shit rolls downhill. Oh,
that's
cool.
Hilarious.
Right? Awesome.
And horrible. No, I really like that. I say something very similar, and I consider it feeding them something yummy. If you're just eating crap all day long, what makes you want to show back up for the next meal? But if you just give them a little treat at the end of it, it's a lot easier to come back the next day for sure.
There you go. We're writing the next book. Find your yummy, right?
Find your yummy.
Something like that.
I don't know.
I don't know. That
we'll work
I
close
take it
titles.
back. I feel like that's a working title. That could go a different direction. We probably shouldn't Google that. All right.
What about not eating shit? We could just keep the same theme.
Yeah, let's go with the shit theme. I like that. There you go. You know what? We're just gonna spitball. We're gonna ideate. Here we go. We're gonna come up with your next working book title.
So good.
Oh, Hannah, this has been an amazing conversation. You know, I really appreciate you taking the time to put this out there. And I think the context of somebody in your seat with your lived experience, writing this for somebody else going through a similar experience is really, really powerful and really, really helpful for folks in your generation. So again, the book title for everybody that's listening to this, whether you're in Gen Z or not, and you want to just understand a little bit more about what makes this generation tick, the book is titled "Well Shit: Time to Grow Up" by Hannah Daniker. Hannah, it's been amazing. We're going to shift gears. We're going to go into the Rebel HR flash round. Are you ready?
Absolutely. I will do my very best.
All right. Here we go. No pressure. Question number 1. Where do we need to rebel?
We need to rebel against the standard of what's always been accepted. Stop accepting what you've once known to always be true. Do some research before you accept that.
I love it. Rebel against conventional wisdom.
Yeah. Don't not accept it. Don't get me wrong. But let's just do it with a little thought process. Let's work through these together rather than just accepting it all to be true.
I heard a statistic the other day, and I'm sure there's people would argue with me about the validity or consistency, but it basically said everything on the internet that we believe to be true, 27% of it actually is.
Wow.
Isn't that shocking, right? And as I thought about it, I'm like,
gosh.
You know what? That makes sense. That would make sense that 3/4 of the stuff that we hear about is just bullshit.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Isn't that insane?
27%.
It goes back to question it, right? So
question it, because 27% of the workforce in 2025 will be Gen Z, and they'll be questioning it for you. So
there you go. I like what you did there. I see what you did there. Good work.
Yeah.
All right.
Kept that percent right in line.
Question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
Who should you be listening to? You should be listening to your employees. You should be listening to your employees. Yes, leadership training is great. Yes, management books are fantastic. But if you can't listen to the people on your baseline, you're doing something wrong.
I totally agree. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been doing this podcast here for a long time. And I've heard that question and responded to that way a number of times. If you read through the leadership literature, that's basically what most of it says. Listen to other people. If you want to be a good leader, be a good listener, right? There's so much of it. You could write, the book could be 3 paragraphs and say, shut your mouth and listen. and then do something based upon what you heard, right? That could literally sum up 17 chapters of many leadership books, right? You don't have to cite sources to know that that's correct.
Yeah. I tell people, listen to learn to understand. And then once you understand, you have the space to speak, but don't speak before you understand something.
I love that. I love that context. All right. With that, we're going to shift to the final question. How can our listeners connect with you and get their hands on the book?
Yeah, you can check out the website x2toz.org. If you say it really fast, you'll make yourself giggle. x2z.org. But that has accidental. Didn't really know that up front until I said it out loud in one of my first podcasts, and I was like, oh, that sounds not what it was intended to be. But it's a spot where my father, who is a Gen X, and myself, who is a Gen Z, we put all of our content there together, and we do a podcast together called X to Z. And my podcast is also on there called Workish, all about careers and different jobs.
There are so many directions that I could go with that, but
yeah, I'll let you do whatever you want there.
You know what? I'm just gonna leave that there, and I'm gonna let the creativity of my audience just fill in whatever blank they want to with that. That is memorable. You know what? At the end of the day, it's memorable.
It is. Yeah. But written out. X,
Yeah.
To Z.
We'll put the link in the show notes. We'll do that. So just open up the podcast. Open the podcast up. Don't Google the other one. You might regret it. And if you do Google it, you might want to put it on private mode first. So
yeah, potentially. Sorry about what comes into your database after that. Oh goodness.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Talk about explicit content. We'll wrap it.
Yeah. You know what? I'm already putting the E on this one, so it's all good. Like it's whatever. It's already we're good. We can just go. We can just keep rolling. Oh my gosh. This has been Hannah. This has been an amazing podcast. You've just been a joy to have on. Thank you for spending the last few minutes with us, and thank you for putting this book out there and for helping us all shape our perspective around Gen Zs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the platform for it and a place to bring the book. It's always fun. It's a boomer endorsed. It's a good spot for it.
Boomer endorsed. All right. With that, thank you very much, Hannah. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. That does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.